Today in my hands I have the Canon EF 85mm 1.2 and also the RF mount 85mm 1.2. This video is technically a review of the RF mount lens, but we're going to compare this to the EF mount lens and see exactly what you're getting when you upgrade to the RF mount lens, because the price difference is pretty big nowadays. The EF mount lens is getting quite old now, but it's a legendary lens, and I've always been a big fan of some of these older EF mount lenses like this and the 35 1.4. This is the first generation 1.4. I've always liked these lenses because they always had so much character. They were not the sharpest lenses compared to some of the newer lenses today, and they all had terrible chromatic aberration, and the autofocus was not as good as some of the newer lenses. But despite all that, I've always liked the final outcome that I got from these lenses. There's an old saying in photography that you get Canon for the lenses and Nikon for the bodies, and it's lenses like these that the reason why Canon was able to gain so many loyal followers over the years. And after the 35mm, this is my most used focal length and therefore also the second most used lens that I have. And I use it for everything. I use it for portraits, events, and sometimes travel and street photography if I have it with me. And so when the RF mount lens came out, I naturally thought that I will be eventually upgrading to it, because I am nowadays shooting mostly on my EOS R, until I saw the price tag, of course. This is right now priced at $2,700, and the EF mount lens, I think when it first came out, was about $2,000. And because it's so old, nowadays you can get a used one for anywhere between $1,100 to $1,500. And considering the inflation, $2,700 isn't that much more than $2,000 in 2006, but despite that, it's still a big number. I mean, obviously everyone has a different budget, and only you can answer if you can pay $2,700 for this. And you know, you don't get a 1.2 lens because it's something you absolutely need. You get a 1.2 lens because it's something you want. Nowadays, most cameras' low light capabilities are so good, so you're not going to see a whole lot of improvement in image quality when you go from 1.4 to 1.2. And if you're just using an 85mm lens for travel and street photography, obviously the 1.8 version is much more practical. But despite the price difference and the size of the lenses, once you get a taste of the 1.2, it's really hard to go back. So if you already have the EF mount 85 1.2 or 1.4, is it worth it to upgrade to the RF mount lens? That's what we're going to talk about today. So when it comes to the physical differences of these lenses, the RF mount lens is obviously a lot larger and also heavier. And I used to think the EF mount lens was heavy and massive, but next to the RF mount lens, it looks tiny now. And when I just look at them side by side in my hands, the RF mount lens feels maybe about 30% larger. And compared to how much bigger it is, the weight difference is actually not too big. The RF mount lens is 1,195 grams at about 2.6 pounds, and the EF mount lens is 1,025 grams at about 2.3 pounds. The EF mount lens has 8 aperture blades and the RF mount lens has 9 aperture blades. We're going to see how that affects the image quality in the later part of the video. And also the EF mount lens has 72mm filter thread and the RF mount lens has 82mm filter thread. So just in the diameter alone, the RF mount lens is already a centimeter wider. On the EF mount lens, there's an analog focus distance display, and on the RF mount lens, that's gone and it is replaced by the focus distance switch that switches from full mode to 1.5 to infinity mode. The RF mount lens also has the control ring, which I still don't use very often, but some people seem to find it really useful. Both of these lenses are weather sealed, although I'm not going to be testing that today for obvious reasons. And the RF mount lens has the rubber gasket on the back, which might give you some extra protection against moisture. One thing I noticed while testing these lenses is that the RF mount lens has a slightly shorter minimum focusing distance at about 85 centimeters, and the EF mount lens's minimum focusing distance is about 95 centimeters, which may not seem like a huge difference, but I don't know if this is a result of some focus breathing, but it seems like the RF mount lens's focal length seems to be a little longer. So when you're taking close-up portraits within maybe 6 or 7 feet, you might be able to get a little bit more background blur with the RF mount lens. And as expected, the RF mount lens's autofocus was much quicker, and it's still not the fastest lens available, but you know, compared to the EF mount lens, it's a big improvement. And considering that the EF mount lens was one of the slowest autofocusing lens available, it's hardly an achievement. And you know, if you're a portrait shooter, it may not matter too much because it's unlikely that you're going to be shooting models that are always dancing around a bit. But if you are shooting a lot of moving subjects at weddings and events and stuff like that, then it might be very useful. I tested the bokeh quality from corner to corner on both lenses, and here are my findings. I don't know if it was because of the slightly longer focal length on the RF mount lens, but the bokeh balls on the RF mount lens seem slightly bigger. But despite having one less aperture blade, it seems like the balls were rounder on the EF mount lens. So in short, the RF mount lens has bigger balls, but the EF mount lens has smoother balls. I've always liked that quality on the EF mount lens, and there's also the RF 85 1.2 DS version, I believe it's called, which smoothens out the background and the bokeh balls even more. But that version is $300 more than this, and I'm not sure how many people will be going for that version instead of this. But if that's something you're interested in, if you want to see a review, leave a comment down below and I'll try to get my hands on that. And as you go into the corners, the bokeh balls turn into these football shapes, which is pretty common on lenses like these. And as I step it down to 1.4, 1.8, 2.8, f4, 5.6, and f8, the balls seem to maintain their shapes pretty well. I didn't notice any distracting shapes anywhere. So for whatever reasons, if you need to use these lenses at anything other than 1.2, your image quality won't suffer from it. Other than the slight difference in the focal length and the bokeh balls, I didn't notice a huge difference in image quality. One thing I noticed was that the RF mount lens has a lot less chromatic aberration as expected. And surprisingly, I didn't notice a huge difference in sharpness. And since I don't think anybody will be shooting landscapes with these lenses, I think things like corner sharpness may not be as important with these demographics. And as long as you get the focus right to wherever you want it to be, I think you'll be happy with the general image quality with both of these lenses. So again, should you buy the RF mount lens or should you upgrade if you already have the EF mount lens? I think at the end of the day, it all comes back to value. Do I think the RF mount lens is worth 2 times more than the EF mount lens? No way, I don't think so. Yes, this is the better lens in almost every possible way, but if I were to upgrade from the EF mount lens to the RF mount lens, because of the price difference, even with the trade-in, it means I'll be paying about $2,000 just to upgrade from this to this, and I don't think that's just gonna bring me the improvement in image quality that I like for the price. To me, I think the biggest benefit of the RF mount lens is the autofocus speed, not image quality. And if you're someone who shoots a lot of moving subjects, then that might be very, very important to you. But for me, the way I use this lens, I'm okay with dealing with the slightly slower autofocus speed, and I guess I'm just more used to it, so I'm okay with it. But if you have the EF 85 1.4, that lens has image stabilization and the autofocus is much faster and it's also sharper than the 1.2. So you're getting pretty much all of the benefits of the RF mount lens, but in a much smaller package and also much cheaper. And also, speaking of the size, one of my complaints about the EOS R and the RP at the beginning was the fact that I was having to use an adapter with most of my lenses, which was adding some unnecessarily bulk, and it was also moving the center of gravity forward, so it was making the camera more heavier than it really was. But because of how big this is, there's really no benefit of using a native mount lens and compared to the EF mount lens with an adapter. And even with the adapter attached to the 85mm lens, it's still smaller and lighter than the RF mount lens. So there's really no benefit when it comes to weight and size advantage there. Well, so should no one buy this lens? Well, no, I don't think that's the point here. I think, like I said, you don't buy a 1.2 lens because it's something you need. You buy it because it's something you want. This is not a lens for people who want value. This is a lens for people who want that unique look in their images. And when you're paying this much for an equipment, you have to look at it really as an investment. And with any sort of investments, there is always a bit of a gambling involved. But based on what's been happening this year and based on what Canon's been doing this year, I think this might be a good purchase for people who are planning to invest heavily into the Canon RF mount system. But unless you're someone who absolutely needs this lens right now, I'll probably recommend most people to wait till next year, because the rumor has it that Canon's working on a lot more affordable options for their RF mount lenses, and also Samyang and Sigma are jumping in next year, so there's going to be a lot more affordable options in general for the RF mount lenses, and by then the price of some of the current RF mount lenses will fall, and also as time goes on the used market will be much bigger, so there will be a lot more used options for lenses like this. So I'll probably wait till next year and see what happens, unless you really need this lens right now. So that's it for me today. Thank you for watching, and I hope this is helpful, and if you have any additional questions, just let me know in the comments down below and I'll try to get to them all. And if you're interested in purchasing any of these lenses, please check out the links down below, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.